So in this, as I mentioned in the WhatsApp, this is actually taken from the Sicha in Tavshim Am Zayin that the Rebbe said that night of Hey Teves when the court case came in. And we'll see maybe when we'll verbringen a little bit after the Sicha, we'll see the connection that the Rebbe connected this to what was taking place at that time. So essentially, the Rebbe is going to go in the regular approach that he always says that there is two ideas that we need to deal with when we have challenges, or we have to face Golus, or we have to face any type of difficulties. One thing is that Golus and difficulties and whatever it is, nisyonis, these are things that don't stand in our way. That's number one. But then the Rebbe adds there's a deeper concept. That really, when we face nisyonis, and we face Golus, and we face any type of difficulty, it's not just that it doesn't disturb us, and we can continue doing what we have to do, but from that itself, from the nisayon itself, from the darkness, from the challenges, from the preoccupations with things that may take us away from being committed to the Eibishter, committed to Yiddishkeit, those very things will actually cause us to increase. The Rebbe speaks about it by Ephraim and Menashe. One of the footnotes is going to mention that, I think also as well, the difference between the names of Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe means he made me forget about my father's house and still know I was there. Then there was Ephraim from the word Hifrani, he made me grow from this experience. But let's see how the Rebbe will lead to that. Al Posig Vayaris HaGolus Asher Sholach Yosef Goimer Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Aviyam. So this is the story. Yosef sent these wagons to Yaakov, and he saw it upgelept. What was the big deal? He saw wagons, that's what he got excited about. Isa b'medrash, huva pirish rash al Torah. That what he was excited about was the message. She's a hoya siman shesholach Yosef l'Yaakov. Shim lo yamin lam Yaakov, shoyd Yosef chai. Yoimru lo, she Yosef masar loimer. B'shah shepirashti mimcha. B'parshas egla rufa yisi oisig. I was still involved in the Parsha of Egla Rufam. V'zeu vayaras ha'agolus sholach Yosef. The Agolus, the word Agolus, which means wagons, hints at Egla Rufa, the calf that they chopped off its head when, like we're going to explain later on, if they found a dead body and they couldn't trace it back who killed the person, so then they had to chop off the head of an Egla, of a calf. So Egla and Agolus is related. Vayomer Yisroel Rav Oid Yosef Bnei Chai. So even Rashi has a question over here. Why does it say Rav? What does it mean Rav Oid Yosef Bnei Chai? Rashi has a different explanation. The Medrash is not brought down in Rashi. Rashi has a different explanation of Rav. But here we're going to bring the Medrash's explanation in continuation with what he said before. Sha'amar Yaakov Rav Koiche Shal Yosef Bnei Shekam Atzaris Higiuhu V'adayin hu oimed b'tzidkoi harbe mimeni. Rav is on the word harbe, much more than me. And this is going to be important later on in the Sicha to remember this part. B'pashtas, kavonas ha-medrash lefarish oid Yosef b'nei chai, shu chai noisaf al chayim hagashmim, gam u'be'ikir chayim ruchnim. Chaim Amasimim Lebnoi Shal Yaakov Oid Yosef B'nei Chai. So he was gelept, he was alive, he was permeated with a life like a Yid, a spiritual life. And that was the Rav Oid Yosef B'nei Chai. That he is, this idea is that he's so powerful, he's so great, that he's still living with Yiddishkeit. He's still living with what I taught him. That's one thing, that the Agolus was just a sign that he's alive. Even more so, that he's in the same Yosef like he knew. He didn't become assimilated into the ways of Mitzrayim. His sitkutz, that is his life. Mistaber shebeiz ha'inyonim shayachim zalazem. Keloimer hasiman shemasar Yosef. Noisef al shahayel lo'idiyah le'yankiv she'oidu chai begashmias, but be'ikir lo'ichiach shu oimed betzidkoi. Because, like we're soon going to see, there's many different ways how Yosef could have proved, even though Yaakov was doubting, could it be that Yosef is still alive? There could have been other ways that Yosef could have proved to Yaakov without sending the wagons that hinted about the Eglah Rufa, that he could have proved to him that this is Yosef. This is not any type of dream. This is not a fantasy of the brothers. This is reality. The fact that he sent the Golus actually indicates this idea that he's in the same Sichos like he was before. He's a tzaddik like he was before. It's also interesting, the Rebbe points out in other places, that of all the Shvatim and even the others, who is called Yosef HaTzadik? Yosef is known by the Torah, by the description, tzaddik. We don't say Moshe HaTzadik, we don't say Avram HaTzadik, we don't say by anyone else. By Yosef we say the idea of tzaddik. Okay, moving on, Parsha, shezeh Yosef zoicher be'ezeh Parsha b'Torah ha'Yosef b'shah shepirish miYaakov. It was a very long time. Milafnei chav beis shana. He left when he was 17. He was 30 years old when he appeared before Pari. Then there were 7 years of the satiation, of the time when there was plenty in Mitzrayim. Then there was another 2 years of famine. Altogether, we have 22 years that Yosef was away from Yaakov. And still in all, he remembers what was the last sugya that he learned with Yaakov Avinu in Torah. Hareza hechacham shetorasei shmura etzloi, that the Torah matters to him still. If he would have assimilated, if he would have left Yiddishkeit Chas v'Shalom, so then you think he would remember what was the last thing he learned by him. So that's the simple pshat of why he used the Eglah Rufa. It wasn't just to tell Yaakov Avinu that he was alive, but to inform Yaakov what type of life he was living. He was living a life of Yosef HaTzadik. He was still involved in Torah. He was still remembering what he learned from Yaakov Avinu. The Rebbe goes on to say, "Avladayin tzorich biur, moving a Parsha shekol ma'aseh avos v'ashvatim, ubefrat eilam suparim b'Torah meduyakim b'tachlis." They are exact. V'chein binyaneinu. Shasiman shemasar Yosef l'Yaakov shuoid chai lo yhaya stam siman ba'alma b'inyan tzedadi. It just happens to be that the last thing that he learned was about Eglah Rufa. And if he would have learned about Hilchos Shabbos, so he would have found that way to send him about the halachas of Shabbos. No. It must be that this actual halacha about Eglah Rufa has to do with the message about his being alive and his surviving as a Yid in Mitzrayim is incorporated into the message of Eglah Rufa. Mefarshim explained that what the connection is, why specifically Eglah Rufa. Not just to let him know that he's alive. The Mefarshim explained why Eglah Rufa was used as a sign that Yosef was proving that he was alive, physically alive. But since we are now explaining it's more than just physical life that he was trying to show him, he was trying to show him that he was alive spiritually, he was living the life of Yosef HaTzadik, a son of Yaakov, so therefore the Eglah Rufa must be connected as well with that message. Moving Sha'atoichem, the Parshas Eglah Rufa, Shayach Gam L'Hoidah Zu. So the Rebbe starts explaining, by first explaining what is the din of Eglah Rufa. Yeshleimer bezem inyan she'eglah rufa mevur bepashtus haksuvim. What's the story over there? Ki matze cholol ba'adama neifel b'sadar loy noida mi'ikol v'yatzes kenecha b'shiftecha sanhedri g'doyla have to come out u'madudu goymer, they have to measure where the corpse was closest to which city that was found. V'yiridu zikna ha'ira hiyas ha'eglot goymer, then they bring down this calf. V'chal zikna ha'ira hi goymer yirchetzu as yedeihem va'anu va'amru yadeinu lo shavchu es hadam hazeh goymer. So in Alpi Pashtus, what is the purpose of this? So he says, Mevur atam b'davar, why was this the whole production, and they had to cut off the Eglah's head, and the Bezdin city had to come out and wash their hands. What was it all about? Kedei she'yisparsem ha'mu'ura shayacholol neifel basada. should become well known. Ashai Deza Yenokel Yosef Limtes Aretzeach Cholom. Ve'oid ve'gam ze iker, it's preventative in nature as well. Kedei sheyishmeu v'yirou gaimer kemuva b'negel lekama inyanim, that we do it so that others should hear and be careful not to do something like that. Because when you see such a big production, it'll give a person pause and they won't do it such a thing easily again, and especially since it becomes well known. So again, it's something that's going to give a person some second thoughts about doing something chas v'shalom like this. So that's all the case al pi nigla. What does this symbolize al pi pnimis elyon? Upire inyan ba'avodas Hashem. Cholol b'muvan ruchni hu zeh shenifseku dveikusei ba'kadosh baruch hu shu mekoyer chayusei. What's the difference between a cholol, a corpse, and a living person? A living person is alive, and chas v'shalom, a corpse is a body, is flesh without any life to it. A spiritual cholol is someone that's disconnected from the source of life. And what is the cause of it? What's the sada? The block that I lived on in LA, Mansfield. He's busy trying to get those, and he's trying to trap those people that are out in the field. Lenatkom chas v'sholem mit veikusam belakim chayim mekar chayusam lapilam chalolim rachman l'slan. Chalol basada. When the person is in the field, so that's the first step, that he becomes susceptible to Esav, and then Esav can chas v'sholem cut him off from his source. If he doesn't totally cut him off, al kalponim lahachlish behem inyan de va'atem adveikim b'Hashem alakechem, he could at least weaken their connection with Hashem. Who has to be concerned about it? We don't say, the guy is he's not part of the yeshiva system. He's not in all Shul Torah. He's out in the field. Let someone else worry about him. Let the askonim worry about him. Let about the people that deal with Sada worry about it. No. V'yotzuz keinecha v'shoiftecha shezeu mitafkidam v'achriyusam shel ziknei v'shoifte Yisroel bechlal koilo bezna gadol shebishalayim. Like we said before, it's that Sanhedrin G'dola went out to measure the place of which city it was closest to, and then the Sanhedrin of the individual city came out and did the rest. Last is as kol atoli behem l'saken ha'matzah v'lishlo mikol v'kolos metzias dechol b'sada. And how do we know that they are involved and they're taking it to heart? Because of what they're saying. Listen to what they're saying. Ukimudgish gam b'achrozosam lo yadeinu lo yishavchus adam hazeh. Rashi also says over there, and the Mefarshim say, would you think that the Zakanim of the year, of the Rabbanim of the year, the Sanhedrin of the city, they kill this person? What he's saying, Yodeinu lo shavchos as Adam hazeh. So the Chazal say, lo ra'inuhu upatrenu b'lo mezoynus u'b'lo levoya, without escorting him outside, which escorting the person would have protected him spiritually as well. If the Zakanim of the city are involved and they are escorting the person that goes out into the field, they're taking care of that person. They're ensuring that person doesn't fall by the wayside. Dahainu. Shezoi chayvasam shel ziknei ha'ir lelavois kol ish miYisrael hayotzim ha'ir al asada ulahaspik loitzeda lederech mozen zu Torah shenikra mozen v'chein levushim mitzvahs. So this medrash says, what does it mean that if you see someone unclothed and you cover him up? What we do. You see he doesn't have a mitzvah, you help him have a mitzvah. We're talking about a person that is so far he doesn't even know Shema Yisrael. And still in all, we say it's our obligation to schlep him in. V'zarzeo b'mitzvahs, l'fi she'ein lecha arim Bnei Yisroel. What's called someone that's undressed? Elam mishein b'torah mitzvahs. K'dei l'chazka yelahagin Allah mikol hasakanas ha'erves loy b'yosef asada. And this is not, again, this is not the responsibility of some low people. This is a keinecha v'shevtecha's responsibility. Val pizish levaira tama pnimi lezeh shebishah shepirish Yosef miyankov haya oiskim beparshas egla rufa davke. Yaakov was giving Yosef a message. The message that we just now said about the egla rufa, that we always have to be with that person that's out in the field. We always need to protect that person out in the field. Lefnei yiredasi shel Yosef l'Mitzrayim ervas ha'aretz. Shahaya Sham Ba'ifin Shel Nishba Lebein Agoyim, like it says over there, that one of the names that Binyamin gave was something to recall the fact that Yosef was captured amongst the nations. Hari Bizman Hahu Hayatzarich Loisafas Koyach Ruchni Kedei Lamed Sham Betzidkai V'zel Shalamid Ita Yankov Parshas Egla Rufa Sheba Muzharim Ziknei Ha'ir Al Tafkidam Lis Asik Belevias ha'ish ha'hoylach l'sada v'losis loyas kol tzerachav kol zmani Yosef b'sada kanal. Just like in the physical sense, by escorting a person into the field, that offers a protection. That's why, in the simple sense, that they said we didn't let this person go out without an escort, because an escort would have been a protection for the person. The same thing, there's the spiritual protection, the spiritual escort, and that's what Yaakov Avinu was giving Yosef before he went out to Mitzrayim. Shezoyan sinus koyach li Yosef lamed b'tzidke gam b'Mitzrayim. V'lachein kasher rotzi Yosef loichiach li Yaakov shu chai. Gam b'muvan haruchni, that your job worked, so he sent them back. The story of Egla Rufa. Masrai,
they didn't know that he's sending him to.
Regardless of what he knew or didn't know, Min HaShamayim, they guided Yaakov for this particular message. Masrai de Echav Siman Zeli Yaakov, Sheparshas Egla Rufa Hoysel Negedenav, Ubekoyach Zel Loihush Paklal Ma'asviva B'Mitzrayim, V'nishar Sholem B'Toyrosei V'Tzidkosei. V'chasher Yaakov es HaGolus Goymer, Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Aviyam. It doesn't just say Vatchi Yaakov Aviyam, but Ruach, the Ruchnius. Shenimshecha Chayis Chadosha, Tchi Ruach, Chayis into the Ruchnius. Beruchniusai Ruach Shal Yaakov. Ubefrat Shechayim HaRuchnim Shal Yaakov Tluya B'Chayim Shal Zaroi. Kemaimer Ma Zaroi B'Chayim Afu B'Chayim. So therefore, when he saw that his children, Yosef HaTzadik, who was still a tzaddik, so then this made sure, now I know I'm alive. Because otherwise, he's not considered alive. It's only Ma'azai B'chaim Afu B'chaim. So, this on its own has a very interesting message. But we didn't yet go into like the two parts that I mentioned earlier. The two parts has to do with literally, if you see the division of the psukim, I would like to have seen it, shown it in the Chumash inside, but you should know this from Chitas a little bit, and we're gonna read it. That the division of the psukim in the Parsha is very, very interesting. The Rebbe is going to point out, and based on this, we're going to see there was two separate things going on with Yosef, based on how the psukim are divided, based on how the aliyahs are divided as well. Amnam adayin tzarich lahavin b'medrash hamefarish divrei Yaakov Rav oid Yosef b'nei Chai, Rav koichei shel Yosef b'nei. Who oimed b'tzidkosei harbe mimani shechatossi she'amarti nistra darki me'Hashem. This is, by the way, in Musaf for Rosh Hashanah, in the Chazar Sashatz, one of the things we say is that about the different people that didn't say exactly or didn't act exactly in accordance with their level, what they were supposed to be. And it doesn't say the names, but it says what they did wrong. If you look in the translation or you look in the Mefarshim, you see who it's talking about. So, but Yaakov Avinu, they say, Al she'omar nistra darkim Hashem, because he said so and so, therefore he had whatever happened to him. What did he say that about? So the Rebbe brings the Medrash. When the children came back to Yaakov and said, we need to take Binyamin along. So Yaakov said, what's the stuck up? Why do you have to even mention it? What do you got to... like they used to say when I was growing up, you can't lie, but you don't have to tell the truth. Why do you have to tell him anything about him having another brother? Why do you have to even tell him that there's a Binyamin? So the Eibush just said, Kach Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ani Oisik Lahamlich B'noi B'Mitzrayim, V'hu Oimer Lamar Yosim Li, Nistra Darkim Hashem. The Eibush was saying, here, give a look, I'm like turning over the whole world just to be able to make that Yosef should be ruling over the entire Mitzrayim. And how does Yaakov look about it? Yaakov looks at the tzaras. You brought me tzaras. Lama hara Yosem li. So the question is over here. So that is what the simple shot in the Medrash is, that Harbe Mimeni, he was much greater than me, because I, Chas v'Shalom, expressed myself in a negative way about this. I looked at the whole occurrence with Yosef as a negative, but he was really seeing the goodness over here. That's the first question that Rebbe says. Over here, that he says, Rav oid Yosef b'nei Chai. He's greater than me. Why does Yaakov have to bring it in over here? What does it matter for Yaakov to share this idea that Yosef is so much greater than me? Gam tzarech bir. Here's going to talk about what I said before, the division of the Aliyas. Al pi Bnei Yisroel shetoidahu Mesaimim l'shlishi u'lakama minhagim l'revi shal kriyas as Parsha b'posik vayidabru goymer vayaras Golus goymer vatchi ruach Yaakov avim. That's where they stop. Either they stop shlishi or they stop at revi over there. Well, posik.
It's different.
Exactly, he says there's different, but either way, whichever nusach it is, but lepoil, that's where it stops, by that pasuk. The Rebbe is going to say, it's right stop in the middle of an inyan. Pasuk shal achriza, vayomer Yisroel, Rav o Yosef b'nei Chai goymer, maskal l'revi, el chamishi. This seems to be, it's all part of the same story. It's all what Yaakov Avinu was talking about how excited he was, and how he recognized what Yosef was all about. Why is it like a stop right in the middle? Ve'ina muvim adom mafsikim be'emtza inyan. V'hu adavar b'tchilas shlishi. Hamaschel be'emtza divrei Yosef al hashvatim. So the Rebbe is going to ask the same question. The stop between Sheni and Shlishi also doesn't make any sense. Yosef is busy explaining to the Shvatim how, don't worry, I don't feel bad about you, this is all from Hashem, Hashem sent me to help everybody survive, don't feel bad, don't get upset, don't be embarrassed. And right stop in the middle of that conversation, that's where Sheni finishes, and that's where Shlishi begins. And the Rebbe says, it again doesn't make sense where it stops. It says like this. Shlishi begins with the words Va'atam loyatam shlachtam oisi heina ki alekim v'isimein yelav lepari la'adon l'chol beisi Moshe b'cholet Mitzrayim the lechura had a hemshech mudgish lepsukim shalifnei zeh sheyosef amar la'echav ani Yosef goymer va'ata alti otzvo v'yicher b'einechem ki mechartem oisi heina ki lemichir shalchan elakim lefnechem ki zeh shnasayim arav goymer v'yishalchen elakim lefnechem lasm lechem sheres ba'aretz u'lahachis lechem lefleita gedoyla u'bezeh, and at this pasuk mistayim sheni pasuk shalachar is a maskol v'ata le'atam shlachtam goymer. It's a middle of conversation. Let Yosef finish talking. Why are you interrupting him? Shemafsikim be'emtza divrei Yosef la'echav ha'oiskim b'toichen echad she'irdos l'mitzrayim ha'oiskim b'shlichus Hashem. Gam in a move on hadgoshes hashlila. Why is Yosef talking in a negative? If you could talk positive, you try to talk positive. It's the Rebbe's gang always. We always try to speak in a positive note. Why speak in a negative? Loy atem shalachtem oisi heina ki alekim. And if you're going to talk in a negative, that it doesn't belong so much over here, but rather shayechas Yosef le'el, beturtam la'amiras Yosef le'echav al teyotz v'val yichar beinechem ki mechartem oisi heina mipnei. Why shouldn't you be upset? You think you did it, don't be upset. But it doesn't say that over there. It says it, Madua Nemra had Goshazu Davka Charkach, La'acha Hafsakas Shlishi, Behemshach Echad in Vaisimeni La'av La'pari La'adn Chabesim Moshe Chlas Mitzrayim. You're telling me the good stuff now. Now you're telling me the positive. You're saying he made me a ruler. So why are you getting back to the negative? You didn't send me here. That he should have said beforehand when he said, don't be upset, don't feel bad. You weren't the ones that sent me, Hashem sent me. That's where he said, that's where he should have said, Loyatim Shlachtim. Not at the beginning of Shlishu, where he's talking about, look at me now. I'm the head of the household of Mitzrayim. I'm the head of the household of Pari. Over there it doesn't belong. Loyatim Shlachtim Moisi. And here we're going to explain the two ways how one can deal with challenges, like we said before. The two ways one can deal with Golus, the two ways one can deal with being engaged with the world and involved with the world, not just being able to overcome the challenges, but to transform the challenges into assets, into improvements. And the Rebbe goes on to say an amazing thing. In a certain way, you could look at Yosef HaTzadik's going down to Mitzrayim as the beginning of something bad. It was the beginning of Golus Mitzrayim. It started with Yosef. If Yosef wouldn't have ended up in Mitzrayim, the Yaakov, the Shvatim, and the whole Klal Yisrael wouldn't have been there. So Yosef began the process. But it wasn't a bad thing. It was actually a good thing. And this was only something that Yosef could do. Yosef could empower Yidden to be able to deal with Mitzrayim. He had to open the path. He had to be solo as haderech. He had to enable us by him doing what he did in Mitzrayim, by him surviving the way he survived in Mitzrayim. He enabled Klal Yisrael later to survive as well. Both things. It doesn't involve so much work. You don't have to go, you could sit literally with a sefer while you're watching the sheep running around and feeding. It's not so involving. And also, you're not dealing with the hoo-ha of the city. You're not dealing with the whole tumult. You don't have to deal with people. You're there with pashta animals and that's it. You're all alone. That's why the Avos, that's why the Shvatim liked that profession. And you could see this in every step of the way. First of all, so first of all, the first situation where he's involved in worldly matters, Potiphar was then an important minister for Pari. And he was the head of the household of the important minister of Pari. So he was really involved in worldly matters. That was his first step when he was involved in worldly matters and not affected by it. Afterwards, when he was in prison, so then again, a case. He left the house of Potiphar. Is he put to the side? Does he have now peace from the world? No. He's still involved with the prisoners and running the prison and so on. And then v'kolshkin kshenasa mishnah lamelech v'niel kol inyan Mitzrayim v'al picha yisha kolami, everybody will be fed according to you. U'bilodecha lo yorim ish gomer kol atirdes hatzumas halalu, being involved with running a superpower like Mitzrayim. Lo bilbalu oisai v'lo hitridu v'hoya betachlos hadvekes belakus. That was Yosef's unique gift that he had from Hashem, that Yosef's unique power, that he was able to be so involved in the world and still be connected to Hashem, which the others at the Shvatim were scared of, and they had to go away from that. Hu shenasan koyach b'Bnei Yisroel lahachzik maimad gam b'Yosef b'Golus be'eretz lo lahem b'Mitzrayim. How would the Yidden be able to withstand what's going on around them? How would they be able to stay Yidden even being in Mitzrayim? Because Yosef was the one that brought them down. Yosef was already the one that gave them the koyach for this. V'zu haisa kavonas Yosef ba'amre la'echav lemichya shalachani alakim lefneichem. What does that mean? And also vayishlacheni alakim lefneichem lasum lachem sheiris ba'aretz. Sheiridase lemitzrayim hoisa shlichus me'eis HaKadosh Baruch Hu kidei liftoyach es hatzinor veloses koyach lebnei Yisrael sheyuchlu lahachzik maimed begolus lichyos b'chaim ruchnim. That's what it means, lemichya, not just physical sustenance, but to really be alive, to be alive, spiritual life. Ve'at madvek Hashem alakechem chaim gam b'mitzrayim. It's very interesting. He uses the whole time, all the time over here, Shem Elakim. Later on by the Fabrengen we'll talk a little bit more about this name Elakim. Shem Elakim Davke. Midas Hadin V'Agvura. V'loi Shem Havaya Midas Harachmim. Ki shlicha zui ba'ofen shal yerida legolus. Mokim shall Helam v'Hester, and not just that it was a concealment of godliness, but was a matter of judgment and severity personally. It involved personal suffering, midas hadin, for him and for Yaakov. Ba'ofen shegaram tsar v'agmas nefesh leYosef leYaakov. So it was Elakim. It was the midas hadin. Shaloi nikarim b'irachmu shal Kadosh Baruch Hu ba'ofen goli. V'gam b'matzav zeh Paul Yosef shiridasi sham. That was point number one. Yosef caused that we should be able to be alive spiritually in Mitzrayim, despite what's going on in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim shouldn't disrupt, it shouldn't cut off my connection with Hashem. He did it, and he empowered the Yidden that came later to do that as well. But that's not the ultimate. That's not everything. Inyan zeh adayin einay tachlis shlichusay shel Yosef Mitzrayim. Sharei ein zeh l'toyeles u'pe'ula shlilis. What does it mean, a pe'ula shlilis? Hagana me'inyanim habilti ritzuyim shebegolus. Kedei sha'adam yishar davok b'alakim chaim kimekoidim gam b'matzav zeh. Despite the problems, he's still going to be strong. Iker chidush shel Yosef hu, more than that. Kishmai Yosef Meloshin Haisafa, an increase. Ukapirish Ba'Posik Yosef Hashem Li Ben Acher Shin Yonishal Yosef Hu Shemahapich Games Ha'acher Hainu Mishain Shaykh L'Tzadak Dutcha Shiyeh Ben LaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, you're taking something that's bad, something that's negative, and you're turning it over. You're taking the Golus, you're taking the world that you're involved in, that seemingly wants to rip you away from Elokus, and instead of just not succumbing to the world, not letting it rip you away, that itself increases, and you turn it over. Similar to the Klal Yisrael Talmudoi we were speaking about. Keloimar, loirak she'ena mispol ma'amanias ve'ikuvim shebegolos, ela adrabe shu shoylet aleim at shekoiv sham tachas mamshal HaKadosh. So now the Rebbe in the brackets are going to bring in something interesting. In what Mashiach is going to accomplish, the way the Rambam describes it, it encapsulates both these ideas as well. Both the maintenance of Kedusha, and even more so, transforming things that are not Kedusha. Valderech divrei Rambam b'negel Melech HaMashiach shetafkidoi hu lo rak lahachzir malchus David leYoshnam kidei shiyu chayzrim kol mishvatim b'yamav kishayim makoydem avur Bnei Yisroel desh yivne migdash v'mkoymai dahainu shebnei Yisroel yavdus Hashem b'tachs hashleimus. That's one thing that will do the mitzvahs in the most perfect way. We'll have the karbonas, we'll have the Beis HaMikdash, we'll be able to learn Torah out of peace without anything disrupting us, which is just about maintaining our connection. That our connection to Hashem is not in any way threatened. But there's a deeper thing that Mashiach is going to accomplish. Elagam yisakin es ha'olam kuloi le'alavid es Hashem b'yachad shenemar ki ozef ha'chalam himself ha'brur l'ikre kulam b'shem Hashem v'goymer. It's about transforming the nations as well. Ukefi shaya b'poil b'yosef b'mitzrayim shaya mishn l'melech debiladecha lo'yarim ish es yadav es ragli b'cholesh mitzrayim v'yosef sholet aleim b'poil v'yosef u'lashalet ala aretz. And ad kedei kach, like super baruch, b'sei Parsha seinu, Yosef kana Mitzrim themselves he acquired. They were slaves to him. V'esad masam in their land, v'oid heviram miktzei gvul Mitzrayim v'ad katzeu, to show that his balabatichkeit, he really ruled over them, so he was able to send them to move wherever he wanted them. The kavanas Yosef, why did he do all of this? This is a very interesting chiddush of the Rebbe that he brings from a Teves Sicha, that he was trying to elevate the sparks over there, and this is again similar to what Yidden will do later on. That Yidden have this mitzvah to encourage the Bnei Noach to do their mitzvahs. So Yosef was already doing that by first being in control over them. Once he has total control over them, they're his servants, and he can do with them whatever he wants. So then he brings home to them the mitzvahs that they have to do. V'acham razal v'huva pirish rashal ha'toira she'ichricham she'amulu es atzmam. And the Rebbe explains, he brings it in from Likutei Chelik Yud, footnote 55, that why did Yosef do this? Why did Yosef have the Mitzrim gemalit? For what purpose? The mitzvah of Milah was only to Avram and his offspring. Why would Yosef want the Mitzrim even to have a bris Milah? The reason was because since Avram Avinu was told, the bris milah is not just for your children, but also everyone who's kinyan kaspai, who was acquired and owned. Any servant that was owned by a yid had to have a bris as well. So once Yosef owned the Mitzrim, they were considered kinyan kaspai, and because of that, he had to make a bris milah for them, which is, again, on the spiritual level, it's about connecting them to Hashem. It was about taking the Mitzrim. In other words, the very thing that should have challenged him, Mitzrayim, Ervas Haaretz, the negative, instead of it being a challenge to him, not just was he not torn away from Hashem, but he took them themselves and brought them up a level and elevated them. Vav. Then he says a very interesting thing about how Yosef communicates that to the Yidden. And it's a little bit different the way the first thing is brought to the Yidden, that Rebbe is going to say now, and the second thing. V'hine yeshnoi hevdel yisoidi ben shnei inyanim elu b'shlichusei shel Yosef leMitzrayim, which is, Aleph, one thing is nesinas koyach b'Bnei Yisroel she'inyanim Mitzrayim ha-Golus lo yafriu oisum midvei kusum b'Hashem. That's the first thing that they get from Yosef. Beis, a second thing we get from Yosef, hashlita al inyane ha-Golus sheyiyu nechnoim v'ad sheheim atzmum yehavkal l'kedusha. So he says as follows: Ha'inyan addition, ha'toikiv she'inyane ha-Golus lo yivalvos b'nei Yisrael midvei kusum b'Hashem. Afshe mekoydem Yosef. We said Yosef was the one that shared it with Eden. He empowered it by being the first one to go down to Mitzrayim. He gave Eden this power. Mekol malchim ayidei Yosef nimshach koyach zeh b'chol echad ve'echad miYisrael ba'ofen pnimi ad sheze nikra al shmoi shekol echad ve'echad. And soon he's going to bring the Maimer Chazal, where the whole Klal Yisrael is called Yosef. V'zeu ha'pirush ha'pnimi ha'Maimer Chazal Kol Yisrael Nikroim al Shem Yosef. What does it mean, Kol Yisrael Nikroim al Shem Yosef? Why? Lefishahu pirnasayim v'kilkalim b'me'arav. Since all the children of Yisrael, all the offspring of Yaakov, was supported by Yosef, therefore we call all Yidden Yosef. It's like, what does that really mean? What's the Medrash really trying to say? Is that enough for a reason to call someone by that name? Because Yosef was the one that sustained them, that's why all the Yidden are called Yosef. But it's a deeper thing. He sustained them spiritually. He created the spiritual state of the Yid that was able to deal with Mitzrayim. Kalkolos Yosef es echad me'arav koilol she Yosef nosan koyach l'chol echad ve'echad mi'Yisrael shegam b'mei ra'av ruchni matzav shel Golus ve'helam ve'hester, spiritual famine, spiritual hunger. Yuchlu lichyes chaim ruchnim k'deboy ve'koyach zeh himshach Yosef b'nei Yisrael ba'ofen shel mazir. Food is unique in all of a person's needs. There's other needs a person needs. A person needs a house. Misha ein lebayis ein adam, the Chazal say. Person needs clothes. He needs warmth in the cold. He needs, especially in a place like this, he needs to be cool in the summer. Don't know how people lived over here before air conditioning. It's like, blows my mind. But anyway, all these needs are totally different than food. Food is something that goes into the person. Dam ubasar kibsarei, haynu shenis'atzem bohem liyos inyan shalahem. So what Yosef gave, he fed to Klal Yisrael, was this capability to be able to withstand the challenges of Golus, and that became theirs. They were called Yosef now because they incorporated it. They became one with that concept. Shluchim Klal Yisrael nekroim al shem Yosef, kiven shetchuna zu shel Yosef nasis chelik memetziusam heim. That's what it means, that all the Yidden are called Yosef because he sustained them, because he gave them inside of them that they had this power to withstand the Golus. Avla inyan hasheni hashlita al Mitzrayim shayach rak ledarges Yosef atzmai ukemay bepashtus. It didn't become Yaakov and all of his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They didn't Lepoil rule over Mitzrayim. Who remained the one ruler over Mitzrayim? Yosef. But we did get something from it. Bnei Yisroel yecholim lishlit al inyonei hagolus bedugmas Yosef ein davar hamisyachas aleim elo Yosef. It's not theirs. It's just as a continuation, as a connection to Yosef. Uvapashtas shekoyach shlitasam al inyonei hagolus hu rak b'ter shluchav shel Yosef. If you are paying attention, if you know the Rebbe's approach, the Rebbe is like sending us down a certain path. That each one of us, to be able to not just withstand the challenge of Golus, but to be able to transform Golus and transform the nations around us, it's not our doing, it's because we're connected to the Rebbe. It's because we're connected to the Yosef HaTzadik. The Rebbe in note 58 says a little bit different expression. He says, the first aspect to be able to overcome, to be able to not be affected by the Golus and by the darkness, that's only revealing the internal nature every Yid has. There is something within each and every Yid that has this type of power and strength. But then, the second thing that we could actually transform that which is around us, that is something that Yosef is mechadish. That is something that the Rebbe is mechadish within us. Let's go on further. So now he's going to explain this division, this interruption of Yosef, what they were talking about when Yosef was talking to his brothers. Yosef Number one, he said, Aleph, to you, remember? To you means it goes into you internally. It feeds you, it sustains you. Again, the emphasis on lachem. And again, this is all yours. Yosef Paul Bnei Yisroel v'noslam hakoyach lahachzik maimed begolus. Then, in the second aliyah, the aliyah afterwards in Revi, v'ata loyatam shalachtam oisi heinam ki alikim v'yisimeni av lepari alodin chol beisoy moishel cholat mitzrayim. That's a different thing. That's the power of transformation that Yosef has. That's a different power. Pu'ula shlichusei sheyiyahu Yosef HaMoishel v'Hashalat HaMitzrayim, which was not lachem, it wasn't about you, it's not about Klal Yisrael, it's Yosef's own power. V'gam shlicha zu hashniya, shaychas l'shem elakim dafki. Remember we said it's shem elakim, showing on concealment, showing on covering. Ki ha-mamshola v'ashlita ala ummes v'inyane Golus, shayachas l'shem elakim, inyan shel din u'mishpat, like we see, Shluchim nekroim adayonim Hashem Elokim in Parsha Mishpatim. It says, "V'Elokim yavid varshneiim." It's talking about the dayonim. Ubezei yesh levayer lahamtik sherak beinyan hasheni madgish hashlila loy atem shalachtem oisiheno. The question we asked before: why does he begin with a negative? You didn't send me here. Why does he have to even bring that in? Yesh loymer shekavanos Yosef bezehi loy rak lishlel. כפי המשמעות בפשטוס, שסיבס ירידוס למצרים לא היצא בגלל כוונוסם של השבטים במכירוסם למצרים. That's not the only thing he was trying to tell you. Don't think it was your plan, and because of your plan and schemes, that's why we came to Mitzrayim. El shlichusei lemitzrayim et hatachlos hashniya hanal vaysimeni gomer u'moishel b'cholaret Mitzrayim ein hashayachas aleihem. Like we said before, this is not something that Klal Yisrael's job could be on their own. Loi atem el arak ledargosei malosem yuchedes shu ashalt al kol haaretz. The Rebbe has that power. He has that capability. Yosef HaTzadik has that capability.
Why did it get punished from generation to generation, the Shvatim, if it wasn't the...
It's not generation to generation. It was one particular case, one particular situation, and even that we needed. You're right. We need to understand what that was about. Let's finish the Sicha and then let's see if we can explore that. Like we said before, Shlishi to Revi or Revi to Chamishi, depending on which nusach. Ki ha'inyan hasheni b'shlichus Yosef hu naila aliyah. He's playing off the word aliyah. It's a separate aliyah. It's another elevation. You had the elevation of Shlishi, and then your aliyah, your oilah, a higher zakh. Gaba inyan rishon shedavke boy nasis ha'yisafa Yosef avayli ben acher, which wasn't there in the previous one. Val derech zeh besim Shlishi b'negel Yaakov. This is such a geshmak of work he's going to say now about Yaakov. There were things that Yaakov could recognize in Yosef. It looked familiar. Ela told us Yaakov, Yosef, everything that happened to Yaakov happened to Yosef. But then there was a certain thing that when Yaakov looked at Yosef, he didn't recognize. Based on what we learned, I'm sure you can guess which was the thing that he couldn't recognize. Ha'inyan harishan vayares ha'golus asher sholach Yosef hera liYaakov sheYosef omed b'tzidka gam b'Mitzrayim. That was the first thing. The Golus, like we said, the Egla Rufa. Give a look. I'm still with the program. I withstood the darkness of Mitzrayim. Yaakov was familiar what it meant to deal with darkness, to deal with Golus. It wasn't exactly, but it was similar. He also went into darkness. He also went into Golus. He dealt with Lavan. So this part of Yosef was not such a big chiddush for Yaakov. He could relate to it. Hayashalom b'terosei im lovn arasha garti v'teryag mishamarti v'leilamati v'mais v'aroim. Masha enkin inyan hasheni, and now we divide the aliyahs over there. The second idea, she Yosef nasa hashalit al kol Mitzrayim, zeu chidush gam lagabe Yaakov, v'lachein la'achrei shevatchi ruach Yaakov, Yosef v'amar rav oid Yosef b'ni chai shekoicha shel Yosef hu rav. That was something that Yaakov did not experience. Yaakov did not have any experience with transforming the darkness, with overturning the darkness. He just had experience with not being affected by the darkness, not being affected by Golus. Again, al derech hanal b'tchil shlishi, it's another aliyah, it's another elevation. And then the Rebbe says there's the Yosef of our generation. By the way, the Rebbe says in footnote 66, this is also the idea of Nistra Darkim Hashem. This is something that's concealed from the level of Yaakov. That's what it means, Nistra Darkim Hashem. Yaakov couldn't understand this, could not realize this. That's what was concealed from him. To make Yosef into a ruler over Mitzrayim, that he couldn't say. He could see Yosef surviving Mitzrayim, standing strong in his Yiddishkeit Mitzrayim, but a ruler of Mitzrayim, transforming Mitzrayim, that he couldn't relate to. So he says, Yosef, which again, this is not just the Friedrich Rebbe, it's talking about our Rebbe. Pasach v'salos haderech l'chol talmidov, v'shluchav, ha'holchim b'drachav, v'yideim b'chol Bnei Yisroel, she'yuchlu lasik b'afotzes ha'torah v'yadus v'afotzes ha'mayonis chassidus, b'chol mokim u'matzav gam b'mitzrayim, chutza she'en chutza imenu. ובאופן שלא יזו בלבד, שיוסם במקום החוץ מצרים לא יגורע מדבקוסם בהשם, אלא אדרבה, שפועלים משפיעים בכל ארץ מצרים, לא קופץ כל בוי העולם, לקבל מצוות שנצטווה בני נוח. Why? Not just because it makes sense logically, but like the Rambam says, that when we bring Goyim to the Shev Mitzvah Noach, they have to do so because Moshe Rabbeinu was told us by the Eibishter on Har Sinai that a Goy has to fulfill the 7 mitzvahs. And the Rebbe spoke a lot about this by the Sicha, after Hey Teves, where this is taken from, we'll talk about that. Ba'ofen shel din v'helem v'hester, u'befratim yeshnam halamas v'estedim, hayichom ligram l'tzar v'agmas nefesh, which the Rebbe was referring to the whole suffering that he went through because of the svarim. Harei aidei Yosef mekablim ha'koyach, legalis alakus gam b'mokum ha'shlichus, even a place where there's suffering. V'oid la'gia aidei rida zu li'ilui godl b'Yosef, the Rebbe was speaking in that Sicha, Yosef Hashem li ben Acher, ad la aliyah v'yisaf shebein aroich. V'idei shemesifim b'yaser seis v'yaser oz b'avidosa shel Yosef, hafotzas ha'toyra v'ayadus v'mayonis chutza, ad l'chutza shei chutza v'menu. When we do that transformation, that turning over the darkness, mekarvim, mezarzim, gula, mitzvah, shlema, de Mashiach tzidkenu, sheyivna migdash v'mkoyme, v'yikabes nitche Yisrael, v'yisakin ha'soilim kullo, lavetz Hashem b'yachad, u'v'mheira v'ymeinu mamash.
Beautiful moment.